This is a water review for Ascendance. I think it's quite late, but well, a bit about like 2 or 3 days late. But I hope it's still helpful for you in whatever tournaments that you're trying to participate in. I was told that you guys need help with double shield spam meta. This is what you've been running, from what I've been told. And like sometimes you use Ana and Lucio. But we'll discuss a little bit about like what the difference is and what you want to do. I'm gonna cover like the basic concept of the comp, although I don't think you're running into the problems where you don't understand how the comp works. It's just like you, from what I've seen, is you don't really know how to maximize what the comp can do. But I'm gonna touch on the basics anyway, just in case anybody doesn't know, because you have like 6 people, 7 people on your team, so it's important that everyone understands the macro of it a little bit. The comp that you're running is exceptionally strong. It's really strong. It can go a little bit difficult matchup would be Tracer Sombra. That's something that you want to watch out for, but as long as you guys stick together and manage your resources, your abilities well, then generally speaking this is a very strong comp, mostly because how easy it is to run. But it's less double shield, it's more spam that you need to keep in mind. So it's like what you're doing is you're taking an angle you're setting up there and you're denying a lot of space and like a lot of pushes. You have a bunch of survivability, you have your immortality, you have a Mayval, right, and quite a, like very sustainable tanks as well. So generally speaking, you can hold one angle for quite a bit. Now that's something that you should understand a little bit better, so I'm going to explain it to you in a different way. So for example, I think I should use a different software for this. Give me 1 second. Right, so it's kind of like, until that loads, I'm gonna try to explain it here. So let's say if this is a corner of the map, or this is a point that you're trying to control, right, and this is your exit. Well, let's take this as King's Row, for example. This is your exit, and the point, like the entrances to the point would be from here, and like perhaps like there would be a little flank here and a little flank here, right? Generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to group up in a little corner, right? Put your Orisa here and try to survive here as long as possible with the use of your wall splitting their pushes, right? But generally speaking, you want to position yourself in a way so where you expect them coming from one certain area or one angle, and then you have full LOS on that angle for a long period of time. So what you're doing is you're spamming them and you're winning by what's called attrition. So you are sending as much damage as possible in the direction that they're coming in from, and to cover this distance, they have to use all their abilities, and by the time they get to you, they don't have enough resources to take a fight up close. So that's, generally speaking, that's the idea of the comp, right? And you guys do that quite well. Let me try to pick an example here. I think you do this well in on Hollywood. So let me try to take that here. Take that example. We'll come back to that later. Yeah, should be 438. Yeah, so you guys do this here, which is really good. So what you guys were doing here was, so you guys pushed the cart from here, and they were coming in to recontest, and you knew that they were coming in from this side, not behind you. So what that does is, what you did was instead of like taking the fight here, and I think this was a decision made by one of your tanks or someone, but instead of taking the fight here, which is a lot easier to do, right? Or for example, if the cart is moving here, then taking the fight here, or basically grouping up here, what you guys did was you guys decided to move all the way here behind the cart. So now what happens is their team comes in from this one direction and you get to shoot into them for this whole time, right? So they have to move towards you and you get to shoot them like the whole time. So all of this distance you can win by attrition here very well. Especially couple that with the fact that you had these two ults, which increase your damage quite a bit. That's the perfect way to play this comp. If you want to win by attrition, but sometimes you want to play for picks, and we'll explain how you want to play for picks as well. There's a different formation for it, but just so this is very clear. Again, so you're positioning in a way that they move towards you. Alternatively, like the default play here would have been what other teams might have done is like they play here and this team doesn't want to move towards you as much as they want to move sideways, and that doesn't give you as much of a chance. Even worse would be, for example, if you played here and they came from this side, right? They had a bunch of cover from jail, and that would be really bad as well. So again, this particular situation is what you want to replicate as much as possible, right? Which is, again, their team comes in a straight line towards you, and there are like as little flanks as possible, and if there's someone looking at them. Okay, that's the basic idea. Now let's try to explain why you would want to switch that over to Lucio and Anana. Okay, so now another thing is like this comp has really strong combos and really strong ultimates as well. So that's something that you want to keep in mind as well. You farm your ults every single fight. Like if you're winning any fight, if you're using just 2 ults, you will need only 2 ults to win most of the fights. If you're using only 2 or 3 ults, then generally speaking you will have a very decent ult economy. All ultimates in this comp are really strong. The same can't be said about the Ana Lucio comp, because Ana ult doesn't get as much value. But all ultimates are very strong here. But the biggest thing is you want to combo all these things very well together. For example, like the pull alone creates so many opportunities for you to combo. This is something that I don't see from you guys very much. I only see pull Sigma ult and pull Hanzo ult, but what you can do is you can use pull and then wall immediately, splitting their team quite heavily. So you can split their tanks and then wall, like after walling them, and then kill them by just spamming like you usually would, right? Same thing with pull window as well. So just pull alone grants you so many combos, but that's not everything. The biggest thing that I see you guys missing is give me 1 second to clear this out a little bit. But the biggest thing I see you guys not doing, which is basically it's kind of standard in this comp, is your Hanzo and your Sigma splitting off to do a bunch of damage. Now you can also send your Zenyatta with it, because the Zenyatta is not really needed on the ground. Same thing, your Batiste can also go away. So if you need to contest a point or an objective, only the Orisa and the Mei are there for it, which is generally what most teams would do, which is again the standard. But this is really powerful. Like taking off angles, what I've been seeing you guys doing, your Hanzo player takes off angles because obviously he understands that if he doesn't take off angles, he's only gonna keep shooting into their shields or whatever, right? So no valuable or meaningful damage goes through without taking that off angle, right? Your Hanzo understands that, but he's not taking enough resources with him. So again, it's a very standard thing to do is like take the Sigma with you, take off angles like on high grounds and stuff. Probably see this here. I'm gonna pick up Hollywood, so that might help you a little bit, because that's something that we're gonna look at later on. But for example, let's say you have covered the second point, right? You have controlled this, and then you're pushing the cart. So your Hanzo would want to take off angles continuously to be valuable. Like he would play here, or he would go for high ground here, right? You're attacking, by the way, and he would also go here, right? Just if their team is not in a punishable or punishing position for your off anglers. So for example, if their team is not playing this side, but they're coming in, regrouping from this side and contesting point, then this off angle becomes very clear, right? Your Hanzo is very well equipped to find these off angles because he has a sonic arrow, right? So all he needs to do is like, Sigma, come along with me. That's all he needs to say, right? And that should be basic for you. whenever you need off angles. You generally need off angles when you're playing for picks. This is the second play style that you want to incorporate that I haven't really seen you do very well. It's just like, I think your DPS are trying to get picks, but it's like the whole team isn't trying to get picks. It's like your Sigma is not really actively contributing to that. So don't play just off of your ultimates. Okay, that will make your matchups very, very difficult. So we'll keep that in mind as well. So if you need picks, for example, if your ult economy is very bad, or if your matchup isn't working very well, or generally speaking in first fights. So let's say if you're defending King's Row and you have to defend, you actually need picks because you don't really have strong ult economy. And their team is not gonna rush you from the front. For example, if you're running against a dive, this is why I said like Tracer Sombra is really strong against you, because what they do is they don't come in running from the front like we said before, which is how you want to play, right? As a spam, what they do is they surround you. Like they will put a Tracer here, they'll put a Sombra here, the tank line will play here, and then eventually they will collapse on you, and you can't really spam them out. That's why it's really, really strong. So before they can set up like this, you will need picks to win. And that's where you want to play off angles and stuff like that. So try to use that a little bit more. We'll see that in the VOD review when we look at the game that you played. But yeah, you guys play Ana Lucio, and that's mostly to utilize your Mei. That's when you want to swap over from this, so that makes your comp into a rush comp. It's also a good idea to turn the Hanzo into a Kree at that point, but as long as you can keep him alive. It's just like the issue with Hanzo and Kree, both Hanzo and Kree, is just like these two supports aren't very strong to keep him alive. But the reason why you would play Ana and Lucio, mostly Lucio, is because you want that speed, right? And then the Ana is generally used for, because you're playing really, really fast. You can also swap this over with a Moira. Moira is quite decent here, as long as she's not in your hero bands. I'm not really sure which hero bands you're playing. But Moira is really strong as well. Better than Ana, I would say. But the reason why you want to not play Baptiste is because Baptiste limits your movement, your mobility, because he can only place the immortality in one place, and once that immortality is set down, then you guys are tethered to it. You can't really move out of it. Once that's gone, then you don't really have that movement anyway. So a universal healer, main healer, is a lot better than in that case. Then on top of that, you can utilize your anti-nades quite well. Generally speaking though, you become fast if you change these heroes out, and you kind of play like a brawl, kind of a rush comp. So what you do is you speed boost when you're close to your opponents, put a wall up and melt their tanks or whoever's on your side of the wall. That's generally the playstyle. That's why the anti-nade comes in value as well. So what you can do is you can speed in, you know, your Ana goes to a little bit like an offside, like to the side of the wall, sends in a nade, and you get an easy pick. And then you can come back and restabilize with your numbers advantage. That's the difference between the two comps. So you want to be very, very methodical about this. Like why you're playing these comps, you want to understand that very well. Right, so moving on. But we're gonna look at some of your gameplay now to see how you guys are doing. I think you guys did really well in Hollywood. I think you had a very decent idea of like how to play the comps. So for example, like here you guys are attacking and you immediately go for the high ground control. And the reason why the high ground is really, really good for you is because, again, you can just win by attrition here. The same thing, attrition, if you don't know what that means, is it's starving the other team of their resources. It's just like eventually they'll lose HP as well. So again, this high ground lets you spam in this one direction for a long time, right? They can't really flank on you very easily. On top of that, their comp isn't very strong as well. I'm not really sure why they left the high ground to be taken away from you, from them. But this is a very good idea, and you would win this fight very easily. So like you can look at it a little bit, but it doesn't matter so much. But you don't leave the high ground, you use your window, right? They just die, there's not much to it. The reason why I'm showing you this is because this is exactly how you want to play. This is why you want to use high grounds, right? And this is basic gameplay, so comms don't really come into value here. The second thing that I wanted to address with your team was your communication structure seems kind of weak, where it's not like you don't have people who are talking about the right things, it's just like you're not ready to listen to them because the structure isn't there. So what happens is like a fight would end, and I think, I'm not really sure who, I think it's Sushi or Shadow or maybe Space Cakes, somebody calls about like the ults that they have used, and they're generally doing a good job, but that doesn't go into your planning, because from what I understand, you have an ult tracker. Green does, like, he sounds like he's IGLing, but mostly what he's doing is he's calling targets and he's calling rotations, okay, which is very close to IGLing, but that's just the job of a main tank, generally speaking. But you don't have a planner within your team, so nobody in your team calls what your win condition is. Nobody in your team would call like, okay, they have like, okay, you listen to the ult that they have, right, and then you look at the ults that you have. What makes sense for you, and how does it, like, how should you take the next fight to win? That doesn't get addressed. So I really want you to look for a guy who has like a good sized cranium who can actually make some plans in game, right? It can be anyone, like there's no thing as like, okay, IGL has to be main tank or whatever, right? It can be literally anyone who can do that. Whoever has a big cranium, you know, they can call it for you, but you really need an IGL. It's kind of really weak, like you don't have actual plans going into fights. You'll see this here. So the next fight here, after you cap, you're gonna move on, right? You just win this by attrition, like I said before. They come out with some ults, but they don't matter quite yet. But now you guys make a call. I don't know if you can hear it.
We good. Should we take the high ground? Yeah, let's go.
Should we take the high ground?
No, it's fine. Read my mind, Sushi.
Right, so should we take the high ground? Let's go. Alright, so the plan was to take high ground. That's fair. Why do you take high ground? To see better? Not really, right? Like, you want to spam from a position that's not very easily contested. Right, so if you play up here, you can spam down here, and like, again, starve them off their resources quite easily. You can control a lot of space as well. So the only thing that their team can do is like push this side, and once they push, then you can drop down with, well, you have a Mei ult here, so that's a very good plan that you could have made, but you don't really make that plan. If you have ult, it doesn't have to be the IGL who calls the plan. For example, if you have a Mei ult, your Mei player can just say, I want to look for a Mei ult here, let's set it up, right? It's not very difficult. But looking at this situation right now, you have your Mei, your Orisa, and your Sigma, and your Batiste taking high ground, while your Hanzo is pushing main, right? So if you want to do spamming from top, you don't really have the most spammy hero that you want, and the second most one either, right? Like the biggest damage that comes out of your spam is these two. Couple this with your main tank and like off tank, and that's a very significant amount of damage. That's not on the high ground, so I'm not really sure why you're taking the high ground, because you're definitely not taking it to spam them down. Try to be more mindful of this. If you want someone to push the cart, I think the best person to do that would be, I think a Mei would be nice, because she doesn't really benefit from high ground and she can sustain herself quite well. On top of that, like, it's really easy to wall people off when you're playing from the point. That's something that you could think about. I don't think that would work in every case, but it's definitely a lot better play here. But back to the situation, you call that we should take high ground. There's no reason for it, so you drop down again, right? You don't know what ults they have, because I think this time you missed the ult tracking, which is something that whoever is ult tracking on your team, they need to make it very, very consistent. Like, it should be just muscle memory kind of deal, where every fight ends and like immediately you're prompted to do ult tracking. You can't be inconsistent with it, not even for one fight. Otherwise you would never have a plan. Okay, what you're doing right now without an IGL, without plans, it's very, very close to what 6 decent players would do in a ladder game where they don't really know each other. Right? This is what you do, right? You have some plans. The main tank says, okay, this is where we should go, right? And that's it. Like maybe someone has an ult, they would call it, okay, I'm using this. There's very little difference between high tier ladder and how you guys are communicating, and that's really bad. So try to work on that here. Create a comp structure. If you need my help, you can DM me about it. It's very simple to do that. I just need to know your personalities though. I don't really know who would be fit for what. I can tell you what needs to be said, what needs to be done. Okay, so let's see how this plays out. I'm just gonna move this a little bit.
They're gonna be under. They're gonna be under. Ready? Pulling.
So what are we ready for?
Fuck. Get there.
We're ready to drop down on them with the spam comp. We're playing like Brawl here.
Ready?
I don't have shield, we have to kite.
Call your mortalities. Like this is bad. This is very bad situation where your tanks have to call that we have to kite, but you use an immortality without saying anything. What I want to hear is, before we start getting pushed like this, that your tanks understand that we have a bunch of abilities still, like we have a wall, we have other shields as well, and if both of your shields are down, then your Batiste can say that, okay, I have immortality, we don't really need to kite right now. Okay, and how you want to use your immortality is you don't want to use it out here in the open, you want to use it around the corner, right? So for example, like here would be a good place. I think you can hide it behind this wall as well, but you place it here and then the rest of your team just like peeks around the corner, and then it acts like an immortality. It will feed them some charge because they're still biting into your HP, right, when they're doing the damage, but it helps you maintain that space until your shields are recharged. Now, it doesn't take a whole lot of time for your shields to be recharged, so you want to play that micro a little bit better. But again, there's no plan here. Like the best thing that you could have done was the mailed here. And now your Zenyatta pops his Transcendence. Well, we don't know whether we want to play this fight out or not, because you don't know what kind of ults they have. Do we really want to win this without your Hanzo being alive? There's no communication about that. You can still, like, this is obviously still winnable, right? You still have a decent amount of ultimates alive. If your May gets like a decent value, then you win this fight.
Oh, kite it, back.
Yeah, I think
Oh, okay, fuck, let's go. I'm gonna...
But yeah, like, both teams just pour all of their ultimates into this. You don't get a lot of value from all the ultimates that you use, right? Because like, this May ult is a team fight, like a fight winning ultimate. Like a solo May ult should win a fight as long as like their team is grouped up together. And how do you group them up together? By moving around the map a certain way and using your pull, right? So that's all you should have needed to win this fight, as long as they don't use any ults from their end that save them from that May ult. They don't really have any. It's just a Lucio ult, and they don't have a Lucio ult. Maybe Bob could help them a little bit, but it's like you could have won this fight very easily, and you lose 2 of your teammates and 3 ultimates so far. I'm pretty sure you're gonna use more now. I think you will use your Sigma ult to clean up this fight, which is not very. It's not very clean gameplay. You win this fight, but it's not very nice. Yeah, you cost your Sigma ult, and yeah, it works out. Now, my problem with this is, now once your card gets here, right, and if they can come out, like for the second point, it will be extremely difficult for you to win that second point, which is a lot harder than pushing this side, right? So you want to be very careful about using your ultimates to open up this area of the map. You have to understand about like that thing about every map that you play. I would suggest that you do that whenever you have spare time, right? You should have a map pool. If you don't have one, you should create one where you have like 2 maps of every type, right? And you perfect them, and you understand where you need to commit like full ultimates and we're not. Like, again, you won't need to worry about that on King of the Hill so much, right? Or 2CP even. It's just like payload maps, you'll need to understand that thing about. Yeah, come on from here, and then we talked about this again. This is a really good movement from you.
Oh, nice wall.
Like, you wall them off. Something that they miss is they don't send anyone behind you, which could have been really, really dangerous. So before you play like this, you don't need 6 people on the card ever, right? Obviously, it's just like it should be 3 people if you think you can cap, or 1 person if you think you can't cap it. Right, so it's just like if it's a race of them coming back versus you capping, that's when you stick 3 people on the card. Otherwise, it's always 1 person on the card, and you play for map control otherwise. Not something that you don't do here. So what you do is you kind of stick all 6 people here, and nobody really scouts behind where they're coming from. Like, you don't know whether they're coming for a flank on you or just all of them are coming main, which is really bad. But it works out for you here. And again, from where they're coming from, your positioning and your ult usage is really, really, really good. This is exactly what you want. Even if they have beat, then that's not enough for them to sustain, like we talked about here. It's like a funnel that comes into you, and they have to move into this like straight direction towards you, and it's like sending a Reinhardt into a Bastion. That's what you can kind of boil this down to. There's a shit ton of damage coming from your end, and they have to move in like one direction, right? And you would win in that situation, generally speaking. So that's the base design of the comp, and then now on top of that you have added these 2 ults, which work really, really well in that case. So you win this quite easily, which is nice. But yeah, we're gonna move on here. I think you lose your Hanzo here later on, and then you still commit to win, which can work, but you have to be very, very careful about this. Now, the reason why this is dangerous is you lost your Hanzo, and then immediately after that you cast your Sigma ult, right? So there's not going to be as much follow-up as you want, right? Because your main DPS is dead. Now, you can still cast it, you can still get value from the Sigma ult, as long as you make sure that the people who can follow up are in the right position. So for example, like your Zenyatta, your Mei, your Orisa should have the LOS of wherever you're Sigma ulting, right? And if you know that we have 0 fucking space right now, right? We're not playing here, we're coming back from spawn and casting that ultimate for the entire time that your enemies would be suspended in the air. There would be no follow-up from your team, because you simply don't have the space to follow up on that ult. You don't use Sigma ult to kill the people who are smashed into the ground after you cast it. You use Sigma ult to shoot the people who are suspended in the air. The people who are smashed into the ground are just a bonus, right? That's for this comp, or any comp with the Kree or long range damage. Right? If you were playing Reaper, right, with the Lucio or something, and that's a very different situation. There you would Sigma ult to suspend them in the air while your team rushes below them, and when they drop down, that's when you kill them. So understand how your ults work in every comp. But again, losing your Hanzo and casting your Sigma ult, you're just wasting your ult pretty much. You're gonna buy like some space, some time with it, but that's not a very good use of your ultimate. So like here again, you don't really kill anything from it. So, like lose your Orisa as well. You pick the Ashe, and that's not like strong enough.
Is that big brain play right there? Oh, I don't know about that one.
Jesus Christ. Okay. So you're just throwing in all ultimates and like committing really hard to fight that. You don't have enough people to win that, honestly. Like, you're losing people left and right. I don't think you're tracking enough people. And this is something you can fix very easily as well. By just having one person call that we're down 1 or we're up 1 in any fight, in any mid fight, right? So if you lost the Hanzo very early on, like say that we're down 1, right? So the rest of your teammates know that we probably shouldn't commit ults here, right? So that's how you can avoid these mistakes. Obviously, these mistakes seem very obvious when you see them from from a WOD perspective, or it's hindsight 2020, right? Even after you make a mistake like that in the game, you can tell that okay, that was a bad idea. But you wanna fix these mistakes before they happen, and like the only way to do that is that I know of is through communication. So call up one, down one. Usually your backline would be really good at doing that because they're not super engaged in the front line, like space battles or whatever. Right, so you need someone to do that. So make a list of the things that you want to assign to people. One IGL who does all the plans for the fights, not the ult tracking, not the rotations or whatever, the actual plans. So you need an IGL for that, and you need someone to do up one, down one. These are the two things that you need to do at least right now. That would help you tremendously. Okay, moving on. So now I think you guys regroup or you lose. I'm not really sure. We're gonna move on anyway. I'm just gonna skip this a little bit. This is where I think, so this is what I was explaining to you earlier, is right now if you see the silhouette, their team, which is in blue, is here, 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 and there's one person here, which is a Zenyatta, I think. Yeah. And they're down a couple people, right? So this is a very, very good opportunity for your Hanzo to take an off angle. So I think there's someone up here. Your Hanzo can just move with the Sigma on the left side here. Let me clear this out so it's a lot more detailed. So your Hanzo and Sigma can just play from this side, and the rest of your team can push main. So what that does is like it creates a pincer off angle thing, right, where it's very, very difficult for them to take space from you, right? Because if they move forward, can probably explain this better. So let's say if they move forward towards your cart, right, they get more and more exposed to this off angle. So this becomes more and more dangerous. So they have to address this off angle somehow, and that makes their front line weak. Or not front line, their main body weak, which is good for you guys. So it's a very, very simple concept. I'm pretty sure you know these concepts from earlier, but I think you're just not I think you're new to the idea that people can split off from your team with the help of your Sigma. The Sigma also benefits quite a bit from splitting off from the rest of your team. You'll start charging your ult a lot more. So it's just like very basic. I think you should start doing that right away. Anyway, we're gonna go over to defense here. Again, you play this out for quite a bit. I think you almost full hold them, which is with the right idea, which is that you maintain this high ground. You maintain it very, very strongly. Don't let them take it, right, and spam them out whenever they try to take the high ground from you, which is the right play. I think you make some mistakes, like your Mei player would go super aggressive. You don't want to hold this high ground at the cost of your players in general. The reason being, this is a super, super strong position, but it's not the only strong position. Let's say if they come to the point, you can still rotate back this high ground, right? Have your Mei or Orisa contest the point and still maintain the same kind of spam that you had here, up here, right? So by no means is it worth losing someone to hold this high ground, which is a mistake that I think you made. I'm not sure if you made it like knowingly. Maybe it was just a mistake that someone died. They didn't control their aggression. But again, have this backup plan. It's very nice, and it's especially important to not lose people. It's because it's first point of hybrid, right? If you lose someone and they restabilize, right, up here, make it 5v6 or even a 5v5, then they have a much larger advantage over you trying to cap this. Okay, so you don't even want to trade kills, to be honest. You just want to make sure nobody dies, right? But the rest of it is very simple. You guys do that. I think the reason why you lost this point is, again, that you didn't, I think you became a little bit relaxed, which is the pattern, like psychologically speaking. What happens this round or this defense is you almost full hold them, right? So you almost full hold them first point, right? You get a little bit relaxed, too relaxed in the last fight, thinking that you won, right? And the fact that you lose the point because of it, it tilts you a little bit, so it takes you about like an entirety of the map to really regain consciousness or whatever. And then you realize, okay, we can actually win, or we have to actually play the game, and that's when your plans come up again. So try to avoid this thing. This happens with a lot of teams. It's just like the biggest problem in esports, I think. In amateur esports anyway, is people get relaxed. They react to how they're doing very, very much. So if you're doing really, really well, don't get relaxed until the game is over. Or do the same things that you would want to do for any other fight. Right, so again, like what happens here, this is the last fight on first point. You clean up here, like you took the last fight here. Right, so this is cleanup that you do. You use a bunch of ults, right? And now let's see what you should have been talking about. Okay, now you have to fight them for one last time, right? Last fight. You don't have a very good ult economy, right? So you need a strong plan. The only ult that you have coming in is your Sigma ult, right? So you probably should farm that really quick. You don't have anything else to hold them except for, just your general spam. And they have a Mei ult and a Sigma ult, right? And an Ursa ult. So most likely what they're gonna do is like cast their Sigma ult on you as soon as they get a chance. Right, and then follow that up with a Mei ult, and for cleanup they might use the Ursa ult. That's a good way to engage. They might do it differently, but you can expect them to open up with Sigma ult, right? Because you can't really open up with these two ults very nicely. Okay, so you're a bit in a pinch here. You're overconfident. You don't realize that you're in a pinch here. You really need to farm this ult to have any chance of winning. But pay attention to the comps that you're making right now. It feels like it's like you're not even trying to win the next fight.
Damn, you see all that Arista in the leader? I mean, on the kill feed?
Wait, did I block the trans with my shield?
No, we out damaged it.
That's crazy.
No, I walled it off.
Also, save trans, Shadow, save trans for mail, man. It can be given away and trans by them. Pulling ready? 3.
Okay, so what you did was a bunch of circle jerking, right? Like just talking about, okay, I know I made a really good play, whatever. You have post game for that. Same thing for the next thing that you did was, okay, you criticize your teammates, which is really really good. You really need to do that if you don't have coaches on your team right now. But again, that's not important right now. Like you have to win the next fight. So leave it for post game. Like do it in between rounds. Do it at your heart's content in between rounds. That's what they are meant for. Like that's why you have some time in between rounds. People even take pauses between rounds just to do that, to do like the criticism of everything that you think that was wrong. Right? But you have zero fucking idea right now what they have, what they want to do, and how much trouble you're in now because you didn't bother farming this ult, which was your only saving grace. Right, so obviously you fucking lose after that, so try to avoid that in the future.
3, 2, 1, pulling now. Big.
I'm on.
On me, I have no shield.
For green, don't try to pop, like try to save your shift for longer. Like it's not the first ability that should be popped up. If you have a shield, and if you have wall and you have other things, then your shift is not the first thing. Your shift should be used last when they're up in your face. What you want to do is you want to run out of both shields and your wall cooldown, and once everything is done, that's when you want to tank with your own body. That's when you'll need your shift. So if you're losing your shift up here early, then that's a big problem, especially when you're against a Sigma ult. Just get farmed here. It's easy. Somehow that's surprising to you, but well, I mean, we didn't talk about this, so obviously it's gonna be difficult. again, if you had like an ideal, like a comp structure within your team, if you were like disciplined enough to do that every single fight, then you won't run into this problem. Hopefully you won't run into this problem in your tournaments. But yeah, we can move on here. I think you get like snowballed here because you're slightly tilted or you just can't find your grounds anymore. Again, you don't have any plans to recontest here. In this area, it's the same thing. So it's like, again, you don't have an IGL, you don't have any plans to really contest here. So you have ult tracking, by the way, which is really, that's something really good, and you should actually appreciate it. But also learn how to use that ult tracking. It feels like you're doing ult tracking, but you're just doing it because other people do it. You don't really know why. Right, so you talk about ults and then immediately you talk about where we should play or what they're doing, right? Instead of having a plan, like which ult should we use?
Are they taking high ground or they're bad? They're bad. Okay, alright, I'm coming. Come. Let's go, push. We don't need to take high ground either. Just come.
Right, so you're pushing up, right? Like, and your ult tracker said that they have a mailed, right? So we don't need to take high ground. Let's push up. So it sounds like you're just ignoring it, which is not very nice. So obviously learn how to use them better. It's not too difficult. Again, it doesn't have to be your main tank. Like the green can do the same thing that he's doing. It's just like he waits a little bit for it until someone else within your team calls a plan.
I'm gonna pull ready.
So far your comms have just been, I'm gonna pull, and you get ecstatic if the pull gets followed up, which is a nice thing, but it's very simple, it seems like. And then you throw in your ults whenever you feel like they're, when you have them.
I eat for you.
On me.
Everyone needs healing. Hold on.
Right.
I think we die here.
So no substantial plans here. You pop your trance without telling your team that we're gonna commit to this fight or we want to use trance here. I'm gonna look for trance here when they use mail. Again, I'm hearing very little from Shadow Beast about your trance usage. Same thing about Space Kicks. I don't hear anything about your mortality. That's really bad if you were playing in a professional team.
I died through trance.
Like, now we're saying we commit to this, but your positioning is nothing close to commitment, right? Your Orisa's far in the back, your May was up here, your Sigma was committing, right? Imagine if you had the same commitment idea early on when you're coming in, saying that, okay, they have a mailed, but we're gonna commit to this fight with our trance. You would see your Ursa placed right up front here, and you won't lose all these people. It's not very difficult. You just have to move your communication a little bit better. Right, but you get cleaned up here, there's not much else to see.
They might push them maybe, but...
Again, you're recontesting the same way as they did, which is not very nice, because...
Yeah, I'm coming. Get ready.
So this is the default positioning that I was talking about. This is why I said like that was a really big brain when you guys moved this side. But this is how teams usually contest this when you're coming in for recontest. There is one off angler, which is your Hanzo, but there's no support for him from what I can see.
We gotta go contest. We gotta use ults here too. Ready? I'm pulling. I'm on their right side, right?
May
Right,
rock.
so no sequence of ults, like how you want to use them. No calls from your Matisse player. I want to use ult here. No call from your May player that who's gonna contest. There's no call for who's gonna contest first either. So look at your May player here. Like he's forced to contest because your tanks are kind of just staying here, right? Look at how he plays.
Nice. I'm low on blind heals.
He doesn't have a shift right now. He uses a shift here. He's so close to May ult, right? And he's just gonna die because your tanks are not ready to support him. Because there's no calls on who's gonna contest the cart.
How much about? Keep me up.
And there we go. Like the only chance you had there to win off of that was this mailed. You just lose the May because the tanks aren't ready for it. And that's that. There are some times where you call plans, but then you don't follow them, which is not as bad as not having a plan, honestly speaking. So if you feel like you're not calling plans because they don't get followed, stop doing that, because there would be zero hope for your team to do anything if you don't have plans coming up. The right thing to do, and you know this, is to have plans, right? And in an ideal world, you expect everyone to listen to those plans, but for your team to be functional, for you guys to go anywhere, you will have to learn to follow them. It's not going to be easy, right? It's not something that you can expect right away, but you will have to learn to listen to those plans. It'll be one person at a time. Even if one person is listening to your plans, that makes things better. If you keep adding more people to it, you have like 3 people, 4 people, then you're functional already. And then you can go on to 6 people, which even contenders players aren't doing right now. But once you get there, then you're actually playing the game, right? Like, you're not even playing the game right now without having plans. It's you're just doing ladder, but you're doing it with other 6 people. There's very little difference between that without actual plans, and like without actual counterplay. But here you make a plan. It's a decent plan. It's not too bad, but you guys either don't listen, don't have the discipline for it. I'm not really sure what goes on.
Okay, next time we pull Sigil. Actually, yeah, pull Sigil. Just mail when they mail, I think.
So next fight we pull Sigurd and mail when they mailed, I think, right now. Whenever, if you think that your plans are not being listened to, a big part of it usually is that now you're not making them confidently enough or clearly enough. Right now I think it's confidence issue. It's probably not that big right now, but it's not always the person who's not listening who's at fault, right? You have to introspect a little bit. Obviously they are at more fault than you are, but you should introspect a little bit and try to make your plans charismatic, for the lack of a better word, so that their attention actually gets grabbed by what you're saying.
If we don't have trance.
But again, so the plan is pull sig ult and then mailed when they mailed, because we don't have trance. Let's see how we use this. Get a big pick.
Are you ready? Can we take trade?
Yeah, I'm ready. Alright, you're walled.
Right.
May as well.
So good ability to use it so far, nothing so bad.
Right side, then right side.
You have a massive wall advantage right now, which you guys are not gonna use, I'm pretty sure. So you can just wall, like, you can go really deep in. Your tanks can push up if your May can learn how to talk, or anyone in your team can talk about these things. Then all you need to do is, like, your tanks can just push up because you have a massive wall advantage. You wall them off. You don't need any ults to win this fight, but you still have a plan. And we'll see what you do here.
I'm pulling main. Oh yeah, I pulled them.
Right, so you pull and you cast your mailed. You don't wait for Sigma like ult. Right? So, and their mail doesn't have an ult, right? So that's not what your mailed was spawned to be used for. Right, let's pay more attention to what happens.
Sick.
Okay, dude. Big.
Wall, dude.
In more. Can you Sigma ult?
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Right, so we cost a Sigma ult here, right? That's forced, by the way. You're asking him to Sigma ult, right? In a position where you can't really follow up on it, because half of their team is hiding, right? So if he Sigma ults these 2 people, they're just gonna press shift and they'll be fine. If he uses Sigma ult on these 2 people, then they're not gonna get followed up because there's a massive wall here, right? That's why you kind of want to let the people who have their ult call when they want to use it. So that's why you do planning early. Okay, let's use these 2 ults in this fight. So like you did here, let's use pull Sigma ult early and then use May ult later. And then the Sigma can just decide when is a good time to ult. Right? Because they would know a lot better on when, like, the Sigma ult would get value, rather than forcing it. But yeah, that's the rest of this. I don't think you will get much follow up here. The pull is really good.
All of them. They don't have
And
anymore.
then you send a dragon again.
Clean up, clean up, clean up.
Right. To be honest, you didn't need any of these ults. Like after you had that me wall advantage, all you needed to do is like wall them off here and then push them, and that's it. That's the end of the fight. And then they will use their ult first if they want to win that fight, but most likely they won't. But yeah, very basic stuff. Do more of planning and like have a little bit better structure. Think more about the game. Think about how to win the game. Don't be lost in your micro gameplay. Like where can we play better, or high ground? Let's take high ground from them without having any idea why, or without sending the right people on the high ground. Don't get lost in the micro. Think about how to win the game. Have like a strategic advantage over the other team. That's the only way you can climb to be like a better team. We can do other WODs as well. You sent me Nepal, you sent me Blizzard World. We had the same issue with Blizzard World here as well. There's a micro thing that we can talk about real quick. Just contesting the point. So you have the same like high ground advantage here, like a nice setup here, but you kind of throw it away a little bit. So the blue team here, and move it up a little bit.
Okay, listen, you guys gotta focus. This is one of our bad maps. We actually have to practice this one. We always get roll card point here.
But-
Always.
So you're kind of forcing this comp into this, which is not bad. Like, it's not a bad comp here. Something that you could have exploited is the same thing that we talked about here earlier, which is them moving in a straight line and you standing here to spam them out while they do it and like win by attrition. As long as you can, you know, regroup on this high ground here. So probably this is a better spot to do that. As long as they don't push high ground. If they push high ground, then they come back, like hold this position. Because this is obviously the best position that you can have, right, when they come to point. Now, the next thing is, why do you hold high ground against, again, because you can spam the shit out of the other team. Their heads are the size of watermelons when you're playing from up top here. So it becomes really, really easy to, like, to spam. Again, the reason why is, like, because their bodies don't hide their heads. For example, if you shoot them from low ground, your arrows go into the body. If you shoot from this side, then you have to aim to the head. But if you shoot from high ground, their head covers most of their head box. Right? So it's very hard to hit the body. Right? So it's very, very simple why high ground works here, right, for spamming. But look at how you do it. Like, they come to point, you have to contest, right? But you contest with the wrong people. That's something that I want you to fix. To do a nice little, yeah,
I'm waiting for them to walk in.
maneuver here, not to.
Spam them out. Just be on the lookout for the rotation.
But you're playing it fine mostly. The wall is quite bad. But it splits them, so that's okay. You want to split them closer up, because if you split them so far, it's easier for them to kite it out. But okay, this is where your Hanzo is. This is where your Sigma is. Right, your Zinnia is the only one on high ground anymore. Your Ursa is down here, and your Batiste is up in there. I don't know where your Mei is. The only two people, like we said before, who should be contesting the point or any objective should be your Orisa and your Mei when they're forced to, right? You haven't given them even the slightest amount of tick, right? You can go all the way up to half before you contest.
I get off high ground. Ana, man.
And nobody stays high ground. That's very, very major. I think that's just like a misunderstanding of how your comp works and how you want to utilize the space around you. Same concept works on high ground here, like later on. And I think by the third point you'll have to switch it out. So I don't think your comp would work there anymore. Maybe you can use some high ground there as well, like some of these funnel things that we talked about. You can still force it, but it becomes very easy to rush you because there's a lot of cover for this rush comp. What they want to do is like play really close to you. I don't know why they're playing Ashe though. It's kind of dumb their comp, to be honest. They should have like a Torbjorn here instead. But whatever. I'm just gonna cut it out here. There's another thing that I could have covered, which is your Ana and Lucio comp. I don't think that you should run that though, because you're not running the right heroes with it.
Always fault lines, dude.
Okay, you're running Doomfist, which is good. This is a different comp entirely. We didn't talk about this. I don't think we need to. This is quite easily like a simple rush comp where you come in a straight line, you put a wall that separates their team, and then you just melt whoever's up front. Right? There's not a whole lot there. I can't really do a WOD review on this either unless I see from your player perspective, which is kind of weird, but it's how this game, like this matchup works. So it's more about micro than macro. Macro wise, it's just like you run towards the other team, split them, and then you you just kill the water split. There's not much else to it. The rest of it is just like alt management. It's not a whole lot.
Hi, Ben. I'm done.
That's not what I'm concerned about though. Concerned about this comp. And again, I don't think you want to run Hanzo here. Maybe on this map it's fine, but I think what they're running is a lot better, a lot smarter. I didn't see this, but yeah, they're running what's a lot smarter, and it's because Torb it's a close range character, right? It's very versatile as well, but mostly like has a shit ton of HP. Right? All he needs to do is like press shift, and he doesn't die for a long time. So that's a lot better. Their comp is a lot better here than yours, for the purpose of rushing into other teams. Right? Again, like the concept is the same that I said before. During the other thing, this when I was on the screen. Yeah. So again, the concept is you use these two heroes to get really close to them, and then try to use your anti-nade and wall them off and split them up, and you change this Hanzo over to a Torbjorn, and you have stupid amount of like close range damage. So you counterplay. It's a rush comp with these two characters, which is kind of weird, but it works in this meta. It's mostly because of hero bans. There's nothing special about the tanks here. There's a lot better rush comps. It's just because of hero bans that it's that way. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. You should have taken some notes. There's just like some few basic points, which is like the understanding of the comp, how it works. You can kind of look at this right here. It's just like comp is designed to spam a lot with the capacity to split with your Hanzo and Sigma, right? You have very strong ult economy as long as you understand how to manage it. You know, strong combos, again, split off with your Sigma, with your Hanzo, pull with everything, so very strong combos. Your mobility is very slow, generally speaking, which is why you want to funnel people into your comp, right? That's one thing. The other things that you want to cover, that you want to work on against this is just a very simple summary. It's like most of it is your communication structure. You need an IGL. You need an IGL really bad. You need someone to do down one, down up calls, right? Yeah, that's basically it. As long as you understand how your comp works, right? You have an IGL who can think about where to play, what is the right strategy coming into the next fight, and you do that consistently, you'll be fine. Again, we covered some other macro concepts of where you want to play, why you want to take high ground, how you don't want to leave like the first, if you're playing first point of hybrid maps or even like 2CP, how you don't want to trade, generally speaking. Like you want to keep falling backwards. So we talked about those macro concepts. I hope you have taken some notes about that. But again, if you have any questions, I think we're gonna have a little session about this. If you do have any questions regardless, just DM it to me. You can ask my Discord profile from Green. It will be alright. Cheers.